panel is actually a good follow-up to what has been already discussed in the first panel discussion. We've heard great points about where we are in terms of this inflection point, where the international order is, and then how the international governance should be changing. And I've heard quite a bit of not just the hope, perhaps, but even thinking and vision, quite a bit of that it's doable. It's possible if we are agile enough, and if the pace of the change and redefinition of what partnership would mean in multilateral forums could be in the future, could actually be shaped by those that could be committed to that. So it's not the moment of hopelessness, I would say, but rather a challenging time with opportunity embedded into it of redefining what international cooperation and multilateralism should be in a 21st century where we are, not reminiscent perhaps of what it used to be in different era, in different times, but what it should be at a time of more connectivity, more opportunity, more fragmentation as well, but then with common effort of more cohesion perhaps, and then multilateralism instead of just multipolarity with hollowed multilateralism embedded in it. So I would very much ask our speakers to have that forward-looking approach to it as well, so that we could see how we could shape the future better, how multilateralism could not only be maintained, but strengthened, not hollowed out from international order. And then what is the role of the new alliances, regional developments and regionalism that we see emerging in different parts of the world be part of the change and a transformation. We will start, I will not introduce the speakers just for the sake of our time as well. You all know them quite well. They are well known to the audience here. I'll start with dear Volkan, with you as the first speaker of the panel to give your intervention.
Thank you very much. I also wish all the NGIC family and everybody who's here, Happy New Year. I hope that this year will be much better than any other year we observed in the past. And I must thank President Calmy that in my whole life I gave way to ladies first, but she gave way to me. So it's an honor having this space replacing a wonderful lady. So we stand at a critical juncture in human history, and the architecture of global governance, painstakingly built in the wake of the last century's conflagrations, is under immense strain. And the winds of change are no longer gentle breezes, and they are gale force testing the foundations of our international system. Today we face a paradox. We are more interconnected than ever, yet we are drifting toward fragmentation. And our collective challenge and our imperative is to navigate from this fragmentation toward a profound renewal. Of course, when having said that, we must first look at the international system, multilateralism, and the multipolar world. We are still benefiting what has been introduced to us after the Second World War. The winners of the wars created a system which took 80 years, and we're still with that. But unfortunately, in the 21st century, we are trying to solve this century's problems with the tools of the 20th century. I think there lies the problem. And this leads us to a new thinking, which is perhaps we must talk of reform now. If we look at the United Nations, I think all the institutions which were represented here are successful institutions of the United Nations. They have reached the people, they have helped, they have given support. The problem is with the political nature of the United Nations, where the United Nations is blamed for being unsuccessful is the political part of it. And the political part of it, we blame the Security Council. And we have been trying to reform the Security Council for now 30 years. So all the wonderful ideas how we can reform the Security Council, how we can do this, how we can do that, is actually a waste of time. I'm sorry to use this because I have now started separating things like a romantic look and a realistic look. Romantic look is that thinking that the United Nations Security Council can be reformed. Realistic look is that the thinking that the United Nations Security Council cannot be reformed because of the system, the five-country veto system. Whatever solution you come out with will be vetoed by one country or another. UK and France didn't use their veto power for 30 years now, so the blame goes to the three other nations, and none of them will be eager to leave the power they obtained after winning the Second World War. This is the reality. But I started looking from a different perspective. We're all talking about the Security Council, Security Council, Security Council. And I was defending the idea that the General Assembly could be the alternative in political issues to the Security Council. As a politician and diplomat for 50 years, I understood that the political wind can have an effect on the political decisions. Political wind is created by the people. And the United Nations General Assembly is the only platform in the world where every country is represented, equal voting, and that platform can create the political wind which can affect the decisions of the Security Council. During my presidency, this came out to be a new step forward. Now the vetoing country will come to the General Assembly. It doesn't perhaps bring results officially, but that country, after listening to the criticisms and explaining why that country has vetoed, is a different situation than just raising the hand and saying no in the Security Council. That might prove some positive results. But this, again, doesn't solve our problem. So I think that's why I said we must start talking about reform. We must reform every part of the United Nations. I think it is a very heavy loaded and less functioning than needed type of a structure. General Assembly is the same. I have my successor here who might also join me. If you look at the General Assembly, it should be a body where it can decide on what to discuss. So actually, it's you are obliged to follow the existing agendas. You cannot have a General Assembly meeting on a very hot issue. You cannot call the General Assembly saying that, well, there's a problem here. Let us have a meeting. You can't do that. There are some special sessions, and they continuously appear every year. Other than that, you don't have the luxury. As the president, you can't call the General Assembly for an important meeting, while the Security Council can do that. It should be given the right, like the Security Council, to call the meeting of a General Assembly so that you discuss the important issues of the world and give the political wind to the Security Council as well. The bureaucracy of the United Nations is very heavy, and it's a big burden. Because of the bureaucracy, you can't do many things you want, and you are, in a way, in the hands of the bureaucracy. Secretary General, General Assembly, President, all the other bodies are in the hands of the bureaucracy. The union is a threat to the Secretary General's work or the United Nations work. And if you look at the eyes of the unions, then you go nowhere. When there was COVID, some people were working from home, like the interpreters. And one interpreter was in Geneva, here in Switzerland, and she brought to the court that she had to work during late hours in the morning or night. And the court said, yes, you are right. But the meeting was in New York. And I said, we have 40,000 people, 40 million people unemployed. So let's kick them all out and find new people. And it started working. But this is, I think, what we should concentrate more. Instead of reforming the Security Council, we must start reforming the system of the United Nations. United Nations is as the president of the United Nations, I visited many places in the world, even during COVID time. Sometimes they called me crazy, sometimes they called me mad. Traveling during COVID time was not understood in New York at that time. But the United Nations flag doesn't have a problem anywhere in the world. You cannot go to everywhere with a NATO flag or a individual country flag or a EU flag or whatever flag, but you can go anywhere with the United Nations flag. People like it. They have no problem with the United Nations. So we must build everything on this. And of course, the other thing is perhaps we must also consider that after the United States decision last night for visas to 75 countries, we must not allow this to end up with a result that 75 countries cannot come to the General Assembly meetings in September, and this will be a catastrophe. This shouldn't happen. We must all explain that, at least for the UN General Assembly high-level week, this shouldn't be applied. Let me stop here. Thank you very much for the patience and the support you have given. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Volkan, and then for very interesting points raised in terms of what can be done, not just should be done, perhaps. And it's very much appreciated that it's not just, unfortunately, wishful thinking, perhaps, of what could have been the best outcome in terms of reform and transition, but what could be done now to regain the trust and agility of the organization in terms of responsiveness to the threats that we all see globally, and then opportunities that could be seized. And as we've heard in the previous panel discussion as well, pace of change that is happening was highlighted. And one of the challenges that most of the organizations do face is that, are we keeping up with that pace of change in terms of how we're responding to it? Not anticipating, but at least responding to that. And then the point that you've raised about inability of the General Assembly to even call for a meeting for a hot issue that is present at the time globally, it's just a very striking example of where the rigidity and outdated nature of bureaucracy of some of the organizations lies into that. And then we definitely need to look more closely into that. Dear Micheline, the floor is yours, please.
So, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, the UN was created to protect the world from war, but it seems powerless. Big powers can veto any measure designed by the Security Council, and the UN General Assembly has certainly increased the number of resolutions that only requires a majority of its members to be adopted. But such symbolic decisions, which the General Assembly is unable to translate into action, further reinforce the perception of a UN as a powerless institution. It would be high time to revive the stalled mechanism for responding to devastating conflicts, but since its creation, the Security Council has undergone only a slight change with the addition of 4 non-permanent seats. One thing is certain, multilateralism is struggling. The trend toward isolation and a return to regional alliances now outweighs the ability to generate compromise and common solutions. The latter is hampered by the desire to expand national economic space or to appropriate assets, resources available elsewhere. My second remark, the major powers no longer recognize the existing rules. China and Russia criticize the system, which they described as a unipolar American diktat. But at the same time, the emerging countries that challenge the post-World War II order have become too strong for the US to contain. Washington is therefore behaving like its adversaries and selfishly imposing its interest at the expense of others. In this jungle area, the law of the strongest prevails. The world order we knew has come to an end, the world order dominated and stabilized by America. In early January, the US kidnapped Nicolas Maduro, the acting president of Venezuela. The US administration charged him with conspiracy to commit acts of narco-terrorism. But Venezuela plays a minor role, at least when it comes to dangerous fentanyl. One thing is certain, Venezuela is of great strategic importance. Located at the northern tip of South America, it is not particularly far from the southern coast of the US, and with over 300 billion barrels, it has the largest known oil reserves in the world. With this attack on Venezuela, the US president has shown what he thinks of international law and territorial integrity. Nothing. Whatever one may think of Nicolas Maduro's dictatorial regime, by taking this action, the US are violating the UN Charter, which establishes the principles of non-use of force to resolve conflicts between states. And what we have seen, Paris, London, Brussels reacted but international law in their reaction is invoked without much conviction, as if it had become obsolete in a world increasingly governed by force. Allow me now to talk about reshaping multilateralism from a European perspective. The Russian attack in February 22 shattered all the norms on which the European peace order was based, with a major change in perspective. The war confirms Europeans' dependence on the US security guarantees. Europe is no longer the anchor of the heart of stability it believes itself to be. It wanted to be a model for the world, setting norms and setting standards. It now turns out that it cannot even guarantee peace in its immediate neighborhood. And Europe is divided. It even seems that the division of Europe is perceived as useful in Washington, as it keeps Europe in line with UN foreign and security policy. It is a win-lose game. A weak Europe dependent on American weapons, technology, and politics, but a Europe that pays, rearms, rebuilds, and heals wounds. Europe is painfully realizing that its friend and ally, the US, wants it at its mercy. The pact of trust between the United States and its ally has been broken, and it is illusory to think that we will return to a situation that existed before. Nevertheless, the American withdrawal will offer Europe an opportunity to position itself as a guarantor of a rule-based system. With the withdrawal of the US, Europe can say to other countries, let's create a safe space governed by transparent and fair rules on trade, on security, environment, human rights, etc., rather than by power relations. In other words, Europe can promote plurilateralism, what I would call plurilateralism, that works in the spirit of multilateralism. International global organizations would remain useful for assessing other groups and, if possible, negotiating international and global convention or arrangement. The question is, can international organization function without the US or China, given that the US is withdrawing and China lacks credibility to guarantee multilateralism? My answer would be yes, even if the impact of this organization would be less binding and less effective. Let's take the example of the WTO. 13% of world trade is accounted for the US. The reality is that 87% of the world trade is not infected by the way of doing of the American president. And yes, the global system can hold on its own. Thank you for attention.
Thank you for very precise points and that you've highlighted in your intervention. And then I must say that we frequently talk about tectonic shifts and changes for the past, I don't even remember precisely how many years, but that change and broken trust between EU and US is the biggest of expression of that, at least the way it looks from where I come from, that part of the world. That was something unimaginable for all of us, I believe, even a few years ago. And this is happening now, and then that really amplifies that understanding how much of a tectonic shift we are living through. And international law-related focus that you have mentioned, that we all think about it, that when we speak about multilateralism per se, can it survive if there's no trust in international law? Because at the end of the day, norms can change, they can adjust to the new realities, but fundamentals need to be trusted. And if that is not happening, can we have trust that multilateralism, even in modified shape and form, could actually survive? Dear Benita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, first of all, thank you very much to Nizami Ganjavi for having us. I think it's indeed a good tradition to be here and to start the new year with this discussion. Now, I think we are all aware that the true state of international affairs today can unfortunately only be described as an international disorder. Now, we have to face this power-based multipolarization, I think, with realism, but at the same time, we do have to defend multilateralism, as I think we all think here. We have to indeed try to maintain and uphold our clear belief in a rules-based order. I think it's really international law has to be defended because this brings legitimacy, and therefore we have to go for a reformed multilateralism. Now, who could bring that? And I must say the European Union has always been the most steadfast ally of United Nations. And I think the European Union, even if it's a little weak now, it can show leadership by keeping up a reformed-based international order, human rights and humanitarian law. Because we are still the strongest economic power and not so weak as sometimes is being felt. But I think the most essential part of it is that we have to be united, because only then we can show our strengths. So we have to work, first of all, on our own cohesion, that several of the actual great powers try to destroy or to diminish. Originally, the EU, it's true, was not conceived as a global player. But if it is to survive in this new world and world order where power politics rules, has to become a genuine global power. I think this is not only a matter of capacity, but it's a matter of necessity. Such a transformation requires, of course, also a new drive from European nations to act swiftly by taking the lead on the international stage when the need arises. And here it implies upgraded governance supported by a clear leadership structure with a more effective decision-making process adapted to international crises. It is essential that the EU either decides in common foreign and security policy with qualified majority, or, which is now a new way of doing, with ad hoc coalitions that might sometimes be more effective. And in the treaties already, there is the so-called reinforced cooperation. That means if a third of member states want to go ahead and the others stay behind, they can go ahead if ever the others can come up as soon as they are ready. So I think that is quite important. Now, I think, therefore, how can we make the European Union stronger in order to be able to take a leadership also in the UN and globally? I think for that, I make a case for enlargement. I think a wider European Union would be more important than ever. In order to bring the candidate countries in, the European Union has to think once out of the box and be more flexible, either, for instance, by a gradual enlargement or by accepting that the candidate countries adapt when they are even already members. Here, I think first of the Balkan countries, whom we should offer a positive European Union. I think this would enhance our common strengths. And a second thing, I think, is we have to be more and more aware, and we heard it today, of hybrid warfare, cybercrime, and fake news that threaten the whole European Union, but also all the West. And I think here, artificial intelligence, social media, they have to be used in a positive, not in a destructive way. So we have already tools in the European Union, like the Digital Services Act and the AI legislation. And this is, dear colleagues, not censorship, but defending us against manipulation. An interesting example of combating that is, or were the elections in Moldova, because they had enormous problems with cybercrime and fake news, but they combated this very clearly. So this is the European Union, but we also have many other like-minded countries. A continuous dialogue and a coordination of the European Union with them who are believers of rules-based order and of the power of the law, such as Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, and maybe even future partner countries of trade agreements like India, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, even Mercosur, would, I think, enhance global legitimacy. And also, you mentioned it, Micheline, middle powers. I think all middle powers, nations that, while not superpowers, possess significant regional influence and strategic importance, they are playing increasingly pivotal roles, and they could also be brought in. Now, what can we do to support them? I think we have to think of inclusive decision-making, of building coalitions with them. We should encourage middle powers to form coalitions that can collectively influence global governments. Or economic integration, we could promote trade agreements and economic partnerships that benefit middle powers, again, like this Mercosur agreement. We should help them with capacity building. We should address sometimes also their very specific interests. We should, of course, together promote shared values, emphasizing on peace, stability, and sustainable development, of course, based on the rule of law. And by implementing these strategies, I think the international community as a whole could effectively engage them, ensure their active participation in maintaining and enhancing a rules-based multilateral order. And finally, even with the BRICS, I think we should cooperate. Today, there are already 10 members, and they have partners, so to say. They doubled the number to 21. And in the last Rio summit, there were guests also invited, together 34. So increasingly, they position themselves as a forum of geopolitical attraction for the global South. First, largely united by geoeconomics, but now more and more on geopolitics. So I think if we all together, the European Union, and also those groups, even if there are discrepancies, work together more on dialogue, of course, respecting each other, I think there is a chance. And I'm glad that the EU at least has maintained its commitments on development and on eradication of poverty. So, for instance, the Global Gateway is a very interesting project where the European Union also helps to reach countries of the Global South, their development, and more develop and maintain justice and equality. And that means maintaining, in a way, multilateralism. So with all that, I think we could be good partners for United Nations and hope that thus we can create a movement, as Amr Moussa said also, not only as international civil society, but also as a global part, a very important global part of the world that does not only exist of two important powers. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Benita, for having a very powerful appeal for the EU to play the role that it's destined to play and is capable to play. And you have a great experience of being part of the EU and have that insight that makes your plea even more credible rather than just a point of reflection that anybody would have had. And I could not agree more than when it comes to the enlargement, it's not just strengthening the muscle and scaling up the EU's capability, but obviously it's an issue of credibility of the EU as well to deliver on the promises that have been made. And looking at Patricia, when we speak about the future of EU strength in that regard, reimagining and strengthening UK and EU partnership in that regard and forces seems to me as well one of the key directions in which the forces could be amplified in the way that multilateralism could be supported better and then deliver better when it comes to the impact that it could bring. Moving further, dear Mehdi Jomaa, if I pronounce your last name correctly, I'm sorry for that if I'm not, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ça marche comme ça? It's okay. Yeah. So I said Happy New Year for all of you. I will not repeat because I think the main ideas were said. I will focus on just two points. I think all of us, we agree we are at a critical turning point of the international order transition. And I think we were expecting that because this order was built mainly after the Second War by the winners. And we found and we set up a frame of rules and of law, and we set up a set of organizations through UN, the World Bank, and all these institutions. And like Mr. Amr Moussa said, maybe it was not perfect, but it was running, and it was delivering, and it was solving some problems. And the main problem is the discrepancy today between this organization and the reality, the cartography of power today, which is completely different from the heritage of the Second War. And so this transition is today mandatory. And we hope that we can succeed this transition through the dialogue in a soft and smooth way. Today, we see that it's not happening like that. Some of the biggest decision maker of the last decades are feeling that they are losing position. So what to do? That's the reality today, and we have to accept that. What I can observe and to add to the discussion that really there is a war today. It's not a hard war. It's not a direct confrontation. It's not a cold. It's like a worm in between war, because all these forces, the emerging forces and the previous forces, are in this situation of transition to negotiate the new position. And we are aware that we need a new set of governance for the world, including these new powers, but as well, these middle powers. And in all the organizations that we can imagine for the future, we have to quit the previous regime and to go to a regime when we give a role to these medium powers, which could be really the bridge between these big powers and the all, what we call today the global South. And you have to pay attention to some transformation as well. It's not only a question of security. It's not only a geopolitical transformation. It's not only a distribution of military power or economic power. It's as well this transformation of technology, which will change. It started changing many things. And one of the line of the confrontation today is who will dominate the technology and what to do to technology. On the other side as well, all the countries, even the small countries, they have to take into account this transformation because it will transform the society, the organization inside the society, but as well the organization between the states. So we are at this transition. It's turbulent. It's the transition from one configuration, from one set of power to another set of power, but as well with this big transformation brought by the technology. And as well, there is something which is important, and that's managing today the way we are treating or we are dealing with all the problems, the lack of trust between people, which is important. If we want to go through a smooth way to find a solution for the future, to find an organization for the future, we have to build trust. And the way we are managing, and mainly the big powers are managing things today, are not building the confidence which is necessary. We are increasing the budget, the military budget. It's huge when you see the numbers. Like we are preparing war. We are not preparing another way to live together, another way where we have these channels of multilateralism or this organization or this spaces that we can dialogue with, that we can build together, that we can check the issues. We are in this war. It's not with weapons today. We hope that it will not be with weapons. And here there is a major point. I'm from a small country. We are not a big power, but we hope that the voice of the global South, we consider that we are a part of this global South, could be listened to, could be heard. And in any set of global governance, we have to take account of this global South because it's a part of the future. When you see the demography, we never speak about the demography, but it's one of the fundamental reasons to create opportunities, but as well to create conflicts and to imagine the cartography of wealth, the cartography of power, the cartography economic security, everything. So it's important to give the place, and it's important for all the countries of the global South now not to be in a passive, not acting, just suffering from what's happening, is really to dialogue and to constitute a force, not in the confrontation, but to help in the moderating all this gestation. We say gestation en français. Yeah, in the gestation. And since we are in Europe, I think that Europe has to change the soft. I cannot believe what I'm living today. You know, okay, for the last decades, they were allied with the United States. But today, United States, before considering the allies, they considering the interests, which is normal. I think it's quite normal. But in Europe, each time, each morning, when the leadership wake up, they still with seeing United States as big brother, as the umbrella, But they told you each day they are repeating to you, no, there are no more. If you want something, you have to pay. So, and why I'm speaking about Europe? Because I think with regard to the history of Europe, it could be the power moderating. Because there is a power as well here in Europe, a technological power, financial power, demographic power, historical power, and could play a role to offer and the space to offer a space of law, a space of rules that we are losing today. Otherwise, the only rule and the only law that we will see managing or the multilateral rule will be the force. So the main idea here, what I'm saying, it's normal. We are in transition because we are living a situation which was causing discrepancy to another one. It's not happening in the smoothest way. Today, what to do? As a global South, we have to collaborate, to create our multilateralism, to contribute, and to be sure that tomorrow in the new governance system, we will have not only a voice, but a position to co-chair and to co-decide, and an appeal to Europe to realize the new situation today and to play a role which could be very constructive, very positive in building a space of rule and gathering all the people together to find this new set of governance that you call multilateralism, or we can call it other ways, but corresponding to the real cartography of forces, economic, technological, security, and to ensure this transition in a peaceful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your candid remarks and then positive outlook as well. I would think that for the future as well, because the potential is clearly there. It's just regaining the confidence in that potential and then the power for many actors, including the EU, that is missing. And then on the middle powers, I just want to bring an example that many of us in the room are aware of, our part of the world in Central Asia, Caucasus. If we look at that, how at the time of almost a vacuum of real presence of the great powers in a traditional way, or omnipresence from the side of the Russia, in these turbulent times, the middle powers in the region, with their collective action and alliances that have been built, reached a remarkable position nowadays when even the longest existing conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan is about to end now with a long-lasting peace agreement, which is already taking shape and form in practical terms as well, not just in diplomatic, and then have a completely different discourse of Trans-Caspian alliance emerging in the way that previously could not have been quite comprehended in a realistic way previously. So middle powers, alliances that are built on genuine common interest, and then commitment to weather that transition and become agents with their own agency is already happening. And it's fortifying the potential for multilateralism rather than is eroding it. It's not a case of fragmentation, but rather a hope, I would say, for multilateralism in the future. We have our last but not least, the speaker, Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, couple of points. Indeed, after listening to today's panelists, the previous one, this one, and yesterday's interventions as well. So just a couple of reflections, if you wish. First, a very important statement in the last panel, that many people and young people, notably in the global South, are losing perspective of their future prosperity. And that's definitely is one of the biggest challenges, including inequality that is there as well, but future prosperity. Let's not forget that similarly, in the global West, if you wish, people, young people, are also losing perspective for the future. they feel that there is no guarantee of previous prosperity. No one is promising, maybe promising, yes, but no one is guaranteeing the future prosperity as they were used to. So that's one of the elements that is shaping attitudes of all players, countries, leaders of the countries in the current world. Let's not dismiss this. It's not only the global south, it's also the global east, the global west, if you wish. And that's a big contradiction, and there is no recipe. One of the consequences of this is lack of trust, not only among and between states, but lack of trust of people, of individual countries in their leadership. There is no social compact. In many countries, it's missing, and there is no chance to re-establish it. So it's what is coming instead of that, cheap, easy solutions, some national idea, be it America first or the Russian world, etc., etc. And then you have the consequences for multilateralism. You have the consequences for the global order as well. So this lack of trust is not, and primarily it's coming from the lack of trust of people to their leaders. And you see it in many countries, including in turbulent developments that are there. The third point, indeed, multipolarity is given, but multilateralism is a choice. I believe that's a very well said truism. We have to choose multilateralism, but there is no inclination on the side of many players to go this way. Multipolar world, fine. What are the poles? The new poles? Only not. America first is telling us that the current strongest country in the world doesn't wish to relinquish their position. And what is dictating the behavior is the lack of perspective for many young people in the country, many people in the United States, in the future prosperity. So again, cheap solutions at the expense of others. In a way, all what was declared in the national security strategy of the United States. Let's read carefully that document. It's with us and will be with us in certain modification also after the current administration will be voted out, because that's a normal cycle. The same will happen. Do we think that the current positioning of Russia will disappear with eventual change of the leadership in the Russian Federation? I'm not 100% concerned. Not 100% concerned. So we have to cope with this. We have to calculate this as a part of the equation for the future. What kind of situation we have? We have a competition between rules-based, if you wish, global order, including globalization. And in many eyes, it's also the liberal global order that is there and that is challenged by more nationalistic, call it patriotic, sovereignist order that basically is ready to create their own rules in their own spheres to follow, of course, in a way still professing their loyalty to the United Nations as the global multilateralism example, but with exceptions, with violations, without clear dedication of rules and norms that are enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. This is bringing us to the issue of reforming the multilateral system, and notably the global multilateral system, reforming of the United Nations. Thank you, Volkan, for the dose of realism. Basically, can we speak about an alternative to the current fundaments of the UN? Is the current charter? Is the world ready to shed the current UN, the charter, all the acquis, and to try to bring a new one, to get together and agree on something that is more reflective of the current realities of the world? I don't think so. So we have to live with this. We need to adjust it, but let's not be idealistic that, for example, indeed countries of the Security Council that have the veto power, they would wish to get rid of this voluntarily. They will not do it. It's more inclusiveness. It's more participation that is needed and could be delivered. But let's not focus the issue of reforming of the UN on reforming the Security Council. The Security Council most likely, with some adjustments, will function basically as it is, also in the future, with all the problems. We have to use what we have. We have the rest of the UN. We have agencies, funds, and programs. We can reinforce them as centers of excellence. They have to work together. Also for the challenges that are there as regards security. We have the General Assembly. Yes, General Assembly cannot give you a mandate for action, but can give you a political and moral mandate that will help countries to organize themselves. And again, respecting the international law, respecting the Charter, they are able to organize themselves. I would add the Secretary General and the Secretariat, but more the Secretary General. I hope that the future Secretary General of the organization will be a proactive one, will be a result-oriented lady or gentleman, whatever will happen, will be someone who will address the issues of inequalities, that will pursue and promote interconnectivity, because it's extremely important. It was mentioned here. People are connected, but also will protect against misinformation, disinformation, hybrid wars, etc., because then it creates a distorted reality. And it's very difficult to operate in this kind of distorted reality. But the Secretary General, and in my opinion, it would be advisable when speaking about this kind of reforms, giving more mandate, giving more powers, I believe it would be good to have the Secretary General only for one term. Could be perhaps extended, but for one term. Because if it's second terms, and I served as a Secretary General of one of the largest regional organizations, the OSCE, and I can tell you always there is somewhere in the back of your mind, okay, would I wish to continue for the second term? So I have to accommodate some of the wishes because of practicalities, of the needs, of the requirements of being able to operate of the countries that otherwise I would wish to simply shed away, to say, no, thank you very much. And with Benita, we worked because they were my bosses, political bosses. But as the Secretary General, I was able to, with their attitude that was more forthcoming, I was able to grab some initiative myself as the Secretary General. So we need a very proactive Secretary General, using to the maximum and expanding the prerogatives. And again, if at all possible for one term, then it will be very clear. Otherwise, there will be always a need, and that's a general statement, to find a balance between principles, and principles must be there, interests and needs of the organization. For example, was I surprised by the Secretary General's, current Secretary General, initial very neutral statement on Venezuela, given the fact that he is responsible for reforming the organization, for keeping the organization alive, and you cannot do it if you attack one of the biggest founders of the organization, in the situation that that founder, the United States, is denying now financing, it's denying direct financing to the UN, to the funds and programs, etc., but also denying financing through ODA by abolishing USAID, etc., etc. So simply, there is always a balance. Let's not be too critical. Let's be realistic there as well. Yes, reform, it is very, very important. And I am very happy that the current program of reform, UN 80, speaks about efficiencies, structures, but also mandates. We need to look at the mandates, including new mandates that are given to field operations. I was in charge of several field operations. I can tell you It's incredible what was happening. The Security Council gave you a mandate, gave me a mandate that was undeliverable. With the means, it was undeliverable very often in the conditions of the country. I would say something about not my missions, but about Sudan. One of the best examples, the mandate given to the mission in Sudan that basically now collapsed, was nation building par excellence, the best example how the structures, the bureaucracy, together with member states, including Security Council, created a massive Christmas tree without the necessary resources, without thinking how to deliver it, who will be the partner, who will be the coalition of the willing, etc., etc. And they put there a normal mission with people used to operate under regular conditions. Of course it failed. It failed even in foreseeing the fact that there is a collapse of the structures, of the power structures of the country, and the country is moving to the civil war. It was happening during in the situation when the mission was there, because the mission was focused on an impossible task to deliver a complete nation building. One must look at that as well. I will stop at this. I can speak a lot about my concrete experiences from different operations. Let's be pragmatic. Let's understand the context. Let's understand that there will be less financing. We must address the aid dependency, because it's not going to be present with us anymore, unfortunately, for some, but fortunately, because this is a golden opportunity for reforming the UN system, the bureaucracies, the structures, agencies, funds, and programs. Sometimes they show a good example how it can be done. It must be done in the Secretariat, in other bodies of this kind of structures, also outside of the headquarters in New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for very pointed criticism of some of the experiences of within the system as it were. But having again learning more and more how some of the changes are already happening with some very successfully transitioning agencies within the UN. And here in Geneva, we can point out definitely several of those that we are very well aware of. Potential is really there, and then efficiency can be really reached with less resources, but more agility and then efficiency into the, I'm sorry, Benita, just for a second. And then one key issue that you've raised that we haven't discussed that much previously is how much leadership means at the national level, so that the social contract that needs to be there and trust in national leadership predetermines in so many ways how much there is trust when it comes to the global governance. And just to mention, not because I'm a woman in that regard, but just to highlight that when it comes to the next Secretary General, the pool of well-deserving and very well-experienced women is pretty good, so that I'm sure that this question of either or not, in meritocracy, in meritocratic way, there is an ample pool from female leaders that could be served for selecting next Secretary General just based on their experience, and then promise and trust in that unwritten promise that the next Secretary General will be a female one. I believe that that could be well served. We will end today this session. We don't have, unfortunately, any time for follow-up questions or reactions from the audience. And as a wish, I would just only add, and then the promise from NGIC is that what I believe that we lack in many ways right now is not just an understanding of that we are in the war of attrition almost, as you've mentioned there, Prime Minister, but what is the vision of the end destination? And I have a trouble in terms of understanding if we have commonality of the view of that globally. So all of what we do in terms of transiting or weathering that transition seems to be more tactical rather than strategic because of that. We don't have a vision where we want to end up while we're transiting. And if we don't reach that vision, we will struggle with the transition. So as an organization, as NGIC, with all the wisdom and experience that we have with our members, I would only not just hope, but could offer that we could contribute to that vision to emerge and then to be partner in that process of shaping up the understanding and vision of the future. Thank you so